Well, let's get into talking about Calvin's Institutes by briefly talking about his introduction and the man himself. Here's probably the most helpful thing to do: address what is a common misconception about Calvinist and therefore Calvin and what he wrote in his Institutes and what kind of guy he was. That Calvinists are cold hearted and detached. If you've been in various Christian denominations and circles, you've probably heard the paraphrase of those are the frozen chosen. And what they mean is they don't care about really preaching the gospel. They don't care about evangelism. They don't care about warmth and sincerity, and they don't have big hearts. Well, here's the point. Calvin was a big hearted dude, and he was biblical, and one flowed out of the other. He was shaped and formed by Christ in the gospel from the word. And that was, in essence, the crux of the Reformation. It came out of being biblical. That was where his big pastoral heart came from. And you can get this at the very beginning of his Institutes. He prefaces it in his 1536 edition, which was basically a brochure compared to what we're going to work through now. But in his 1536 edition, he addressed it to Francis I. Calvin was displaced in Geneva. We can get into history later. He didn't want to be there. He wanted to be an academic. But all that to say, listen to Calvin's own explanation to the king of his fellow countrymen that he's not there anymore. Listen to why he says he's writing this work. And I toiled at the task, that is, writing the Institutes, chiefly for the sake of my countrymen, the French, multitudes of whom I perceive to be hungering and thirsting after Christ, while very few seem to have been duly imbued with even a slender knowledge of him. That this was the object which I had in view is apparent from this work itself, which is written in simple and elementary form, adapted for instruction. So why is he writing the Institutes? He's not teaching Christians how to be cold, detached, heads on sticks, all head, no heart. His countrymen are hungering and thirsting to know Jesus. And what's the dilemma? That the then and current, I would argue, Roman Catholic system has so corrupted and diluted and twisted the pure teaching of the gospel and what the Bible actually holds forth, that people are not only not getting Jesus, who they are hungering and thirsting for, they are getting what he'll later say is the popish mass from the Antichrist, the Pope, as a veil of darkness. They want Christ, they're hungering and thirsting for him, and they're not getting him. They're getting the opposite, a cult of the Antichrist, of darkness. And he cares enough to say, this is what the Bible teaches. His introduction to the king, this preface, is littered with his knowledge of Scripture. And even if you just think to earlier on, his own explanation as to, I can remember it, why am I writing the Institutes? And what is the whole course of my ministry? Calvin would say, I have endeavored at all points to exist and to have my ministry to exalt and magnify Christ for the glory of God. He has a bad reputation nowadays, which isn't earned by people who haven't even read 2% of his foremost work, the Institute, which is a cornerstone of the development of Christian theology post-scholastics and on. And as I do a very slow 5-minute or less snippet walkthrough of his Institutes, I hope you'll begin to see that. But the launching off point is this. Let's engage that foremost objection, that modern day Calvinist and Calvin himself were the frozen chosen, cold and detached. No, that is not the case at all. Their biblical study, that is, and their literacy and the teaching that flowed from it gave them warm hearts for their people, for their own countrymen. They wanted them to be satisfied by Christ in their hunger and spiritual thirst. And so that's what I want you to see about Calvin at this part. Well, thank you for listening to this part one or zero, we could say, of diving into Calvin's Institutes. I'm going to keep these at around 5 minutes or less, and I'll try and keep them forthcoming week to week. Thanks for listening.